question about how we deal with Chinese overcapacity, I think, is why we're all here today. And a lot of people have proposed solutions, including Senator Cassidy with his legislation. And I just want to thank the Senator and his team for their partnership. One of the things that I think we really value is just an open line of communication with the Senator and his office, because these are highly complex issues that have significant implications. And one of the risks that we see with respect to organizing trade around carbon emissions or CO2 emissions is the implementation. And when one of the panelists earlier made a comment about, give Washington the tools that they need and they'll do it. I kind of sat there in the second row and chuckled a little bit, because if anybody knows anything about the experience of the chemical industry in the last decade with respect to the EPA and chemical regulation, it hasn't been a pretty picture. And so, when I think about the execution risk of implementing what I think are very well-intentioned policies, that execution risk is very high. And the companies in the chemical sector, and the steel sector, and fertilizer sector are the ones that ultimately are going to have to manage this. And as the Entergy CEO said on the previous panel, our companies have very, very thin margins. And as costs go up, that eats into margins. And I know in the chemical industry, from the CEO level on down, the issue of chemical regulation at the federal level has been the number one issue for us in the last 5 years, and it hasn't gone very well. And this is after a bipartisan bill passed in 2016. I see Senator Landrieu there. She was a part of this. You had David Vitter and Barbara Boxer come together. You had environmental NGOs. You had chemical companies. You had the full value chain that worked for over a decade. And I don't know if there's a piece of legislation in the last 25 years that had such a broad coalition of support to pass through the Congress. And it totally reformed the chemical regulation process in America. And at the time, it was about innovation and setting us up for the future. And that implementation has not gone well. And that I think that's a bipartisan agreement on that. There's a lot of reasons why, but as an industry that is dealing with agencies that don't enable us to invent new molecules that will lower everybody else's emissions, that is very challenging. And the idea of having to manage more agencies and government bureaucrats that don't understand the complexity of our business, that is something that I think we have to be very, very careful as we go forward with what I think are well-intentioned ideas. We have to be very careful about the execution.